Hey everybody, this is Carlos Ocelot, and you're watching Dan Can's channel. Thorin, my man. Enjoy.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Daring Minds, the show, blah, 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 Geo, me, Thorin, I don't come from VALORANT, blah, 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 CSGO, a lot of references to CSGO, Overwatch, but that's the whole episode. So you've skipped it all on 5 times speed, come back for the next one. No, obviously, it's the show we do in VALORANT, where I'm a noob, Geo knows more than me. I won't say she knows everything, because it wouldn't also be fair to characterise it that way. She definitely knows way more than me, though. And here's someone who hopefully knows a lot, because he did all the studying, all the practice for the Masters, he just never played in it. So just like most NA teams, they're not just a joke, obviously. Right, this is obviously Derke from FNATIC we've got here. Now, here's the thing, Derke. The saddest thing about what happened with you at the Masters as well is everywhere I looked and people talked about FNATIC, the whole storyline was like, but Derke will be there though. So when he comes in the team, then they will have a chance. Maybe they can win the tournament. And obviously, if people don't know, like you can explain the situation, but essentially you went there, but because of the situation, you've never actually played. And unfortunately, because they got knocked out in the group stage, you never got sort of activated, right? Essentially, they had to get out the group stage. And give us your thoughts. What happened, basically? Why didn't we see Derke?
Yeah, so basically, after our bootcamp in London, when I flew back to Finland, I got COVID, and because of that, I tested positive. So Riot didn't let me to come to Iceland, even though Iceland travel requirements they don't care if you have COVID or not, apparently.
Okay.
So I could go there, but but they wouldn't let me in the hotel. And then Riot told me I need to I got COVID on 29th of last month, which is March. So Riot told me to get a negative till Monday, 4th of April, and I did not. So I didn't make it in groups.
Right.
And we had to search for a stand-in. So at that moment, I was praying to get negative because they told me I can still get into the tournament. I got negative on Thursday, Wednesday, and then they told me, okay, you're flying on Friday. I flew out on Friday. First, they told us that I can play. Then after 2 hours or something, they told me I cannot play and I need my team to make it to the playoffs. So pass the groups with 2 wins, and then I can play. So basically, we had to play with 2 stand-ins because I got COVID and Brave couldn't travel because
there's own circumstances,
and suspended, So basically that, and I couldn't tell that I'm not gonna play because we wanted to make sure Zeta and IP and those teams were still curious if I'm gonna play or not, shake them a bit on that. So yeah.
Oh, so you tactically you didn't let them know if you'd be in those matches. So they might prepare
I was kind of telling people that I was playing, then to some that I was.
Okay, this is my Game of Thrones shit behind the scenes. Fair enough.
Yeah,
okay.
But
that's good. I like it.
It didn't matter. Yeah.
Mind games.
Use what you got. You can't actually play in the games. Use what you can against the other teams.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Okay, not a bad angle. Obviously, as I said, the problem was they didn't get out the group, right? Before we go into the other teams, just give me your thoughts on how you actually thought FNATIC played. Obviously, they had the stand-in situation. What did they try to do to cope with it? Because I know one thing that I'm always interested in when you have a stand-in is the philosophy you choose. Because the typical philosophy is you just say, sorry, you have to do whatever the player you're replacing me does. Essentially, you have to pretend to be him. Or you can do it where it's we'll all shift around roles and accommodate you. What was the logic of how they were trying to use the stand-ins?
We were trying to use stand-ins, just as you said, try to fill their shoes and play on their agents, whatever, and do the same things as we did because they had a week to practice.
Right.
Together. So they tried to make them play as me and Brave, but it didn't work out. And I think next time we have a stand-in or someone has that situation, it's better to just yell it and say, do whatever you guys want and what's the best, because I think that's when the teams shine a lot.
I mean, especially in your case, since you're one of the star players, mate. So whoever the stand-in is almost certainly isn't going to be as good and in your team as good. So kind of makes more sense. But at the same time, I get that they were in a tough situation because they were hoping they sneak out the group and you just come back and everything's great. You go back to the old practice, I've no doubt. What did you think, Gio? How were they different without Derke versus with?
I didn't get to see a lot of FNATIC play actually, but I remember that a lot of the the narrative that was going along I caught up with a number of like the desk segments when I missed games, because, you know, that was kind of the easiest way for me to pick up on stuff. And a lot of the narrative was definitely like, you know, lacking their star player this, lacking their star player that, which I think is a fair way of looking at things, especially as during the regular season in stage 1, you were definitely one of the players who was being spoken about the most on the team, at least in comparison, I feel, to how when I was casting EMEA last year, it felt like we were talking a lot more about like Boaster, for example, than we were necessarily about like you, Derke, just in, not that we weren't talking about you, but just the level has kind of changed a little bit. So I think that it was really felt like your absence on the team, just because, well, whether rightly or wrongly, like a lot of people were putting that kind of responsibility on your shoulders, as like the expectation was on you to be the guy who was gonna bring the team to success, like leading that charge. I don't know how that made you feel in terms of like whether you feel like you can deal with that expectation well, or whether that was like too pressurizing, or like, and especially when you realized that you couldn't play because of the COVID situation. I'd be actually really curious to know your thoughts on that, because I, you know, as a spectator, like felt bad for you and bad for your team because of the situation is out of your control. But for you particularly, knowing that you've gone into this competition with your team and everyone's looking at you in particular, and then you are taken out of the competition, like what does that do for you? Like, how did that make you feel?
Well, yeah, when I got the news, I was like, I'll probably miss out this Masters at all. Like, I didn't think I had even a chance to play or something, to travel there.
Okay.
So, because first I got news that like you're out, but then they told me that I can maybe make it. So of course it was like sad that I'm missing like international like event when everything was like going good for us. And especially me, when I don't want to miss any event and always like perform and go in the summer. And then I also felt bad for the team, kind of that because I'm going to miss out and we already had a stand-in, is like probably going to be super hard for them, especially like missing me. It's like I kind of knew it's going to be like doomed, but I didn't think they're going to like bomb out of the groups. Because I still thought the groups is like maybe easy and make it. And when I knew I can make it to playoffs, I was like, oh, maybe we can still like get this event easily. But then like we didn't, and of course it felt sad like missing out. But I think like because I cannot control anything, and it's not like I didn't qualify. It's just like I got COVID and didn't make it. It wasn't like that sad when I realized it's not under my control. And then like the question about pressure and whatever, I think we're kind of like putting a lot of like job on myself at some points, but also like if it works, why not? Like I never had a like feeling of like pressure or something. It's like always I'm playing the game as I always played, so it's not like I'm shaking or anything, and I'm like ready to perform. As long as I do my things correctly, I think I can always do that. And like I know it's like hard for some stand-in from VRL to come in and like do the job also. But we didn't have many options either. But I think he did like decent job on that.
I appreciate you leaning into the Finnish stereotype of just the flat, cold-blooded killer, no emotion involved. If people don't know, there's that famous story of the guy who has the most sniper kills in history. I don't know his name, you'll know it. It's like that famous... There you go, it's a really famous Finnish sniper, right? And this is how Finnish people are, because I lived there for a while. When people asked him, what was your secret to killing so many people? Right, the normal answer should be something like, you know, the way I train. Right? He just said, just practice a lot. Like that was his answer. Like, but here's the thing: if you understand that answer, you understand Finnish mindset. So I love it. Right, here's the question then, because when we had some past episodes, like in fact the last one we had Barbar from Guild, the coach. They were bigging you up, dude. Like they think you're one of the best players in the world. Do you see yourself in that position in your role? Are you one of the best?
Yeah, I feel like I'm one of the best, but I'm never gonna consider myself as the best if I don't win anything. It's just like in my mind, like I cannot call myself best or like even close to the best if I don't win anything. I can be like potentially the best or like one of the best, but not the best yet.
Where would you rank him at his role, Gio?
That's a really unfair and hard question.
It is, but that's the nature of the show.
Of course. I think that one way that you can look at it, where I think I would put you very, very high up, like, I don't know who I'd give, like, number 1, number 2.
Yeah,
I think even here, like, maybe Leaf would still probably be in the number 1 for me, but, like, is in the, when we look at, like, the team holistically, to what extent or to what proportion do you still take up, like, the majority of the conversation as being someone who's getting things done or being like a big driving force behind that? And I think that a lot of teams right now, at least in EUNA, like FNATIC is one of the teams where you see those kinds of conversations the most, where it's like, it's kind of like that sort of ascend effect where it's like CNED this, CNED that. And that's obviously not to say that the other people in the team aren't doing their job. They absolutely are, but they are setting him up really well.
Sure.
And he himself at his role is so good that he really excels and gets spoken about in that star player factor. Whereas you do then get like some other teams where the Guard would be a really good example of this, where you don't necessarily look at them and say like, okay, here's that 1-star player or like this 1-star duelist who's really outstanding and carrying everyone else is maybe an unfair way of putting it, but like, you know, is leading that charge. And you talk about, there's kind of more of a balance, I think, in the way that the people on that team are spoken about and what different values everyone provides. Because it's like Trent, obviously being a big person people talk about, doesn't just provide the value of being like a great Sova. He also takes some of that job that you might get from a star DPS in another team. So I think that like, you're definitely up there. I mean, obviously top 10, arguably top 5. I don't know who I would put you alongside, like, because it's Ye would be up there. Yeah, like Leaf, like these kinds of people.
I think the style, by the way, that you used was pretty good there, like where you sort of just contrast how different they are. I think that was a good way to set it up.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like there, you know, it's interesting because you do have these like different teams that are spoken about in different ways in terms of like where the that real like power comes from at different parts of the team. And I think that the conversation surrounding FNATIC, at least in 2022, has been very consistent in like this bit comes from this bit comes from this, and it's always been like Derke the star player, TM. You know what I mean? So I think that definitely lends itself to putting you very high up in that list. But I do totally understand what you mean by saying, like, I'm never going to consider myself the best at my role if I haven't won anything. I think that in and of itself is an interesting conversation because, like, winning something requires like the team to be greater than the sum of its parts and is not necessarily individually down to like just one person really great being great at something. And actually in a lot of cases, and this transcends whichever esport you're talking about, you'll find teams that have like a really incredible star player and they haven't won stuff because like that in and of itself is not the answer to winning things. So I think you can still be in the conversation for being the best at your role and not having actually won anything. But whether being the best in your role actually fucking matters is if you haven't won anything, I think is where that conversation starts to change.
Yeah. I mean, look, in terms of mentality, obviously it's a great mentality to have. Look, he comes from CSGO, so he's fully familiar with, like, Simple was the best player even when Na'Vi didn't win. Like, everyone just knew it, you know, you could see. But at the same time, I agree. If you are the player, you should. It's a way to keep yourself hungry, right? You believe that you have to go for the championship. And it's also just whack, to be fair, because if you actually admit you're the best, it also implies like my team must suck. So you have to be careful with that answer anyway. If you think about it, so you actually did a good job navigating that one. What do you think yourself though? So when she was contrasting a lot of the different players, by the way, we unabashedly on this show lean into our NA bias. We are biased to NA. That's just the way the show goes. Spoiler, it's just because we're secretly trying to get you hired to work in NA.
I want a visa, man.
No, so keep it under your hat though. Keep your hat. So my question would just be, like, do you ever watch VCT NA? You ever watched the NA region?
Sometimes I do. Yeah, sometimes I do.
What do you think of Leaf?
I think overrated, to be honest.
He is?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I want him at champs, and
it's like, true. He hasn't been in much tournament, sure.
Like already, if I beat someone and he didn't beat me, I already consider him like much lower.
Okay,
that's like always for me, and also like, yeah, he may be like. Maybe considered the best, but he didn't even like qualify out of 2 teams that qualified. and like I just don't see like why right now. Yeah, he has insane numbers, but like
I'm almost scared to ask what you think of fucking tens. Then it could burn the whole podcast down. Come on, what do you think? Fucking hell. Bloody hell.
Tens is like,
overrated, maybe.
I will always consider him good, but like right now, like fell off a bit or like has a slump or whatever. He can bounce back, if he wants to, I think, and if he puts time, and also like it's not only his problem. The whole team.
No, of course,
like that.
yes,
so
they've got a whole lot of problems. Yes,
yeah. But I don't want to trash talk them.
No, fair enough.
Because I lost to them in the finals, so.
Okay, I see. At least I can see sort of his method of operation. It's like if he beats you,
quite a while ago, though.
No, it doesn't matter. If he beats you, you are below him. If you beat him, you are above him. Listen, it's a very simple system. Like he's on sort of like a feudal system or something from back in the day. So okay, here's the question then, right? Obviously, one of the reasons why you never got to play is because even though on paper in the group stage that looked doable, like that wouldn't be impossible. They could sneak out second, maybe. The problem is, as we're going to talk about on this episode, it turns out there almost are no bad teams at the fucking tournament, including all regions. Magically now, have just been like, it's something like fucking diversity wet dream. Like everyone is just equally good or something mad and has their own chance to win. So as we found out, like at the time, by the way, initially looked embarrassing that like Zeta can get out. Now it looks great. They're fucking one of the top teams in the tournament. So were you shocked at the level of some of the other teams, Derke?
Yeah, I was shocked by Zeta and Paper X. Also, I knew Loud is gonna like make upsets or get high, but I didn't think like that high. Yeah. And I think Optic was like expectable.
Right.
But like
a lot of people thought they might be the best.
I'm surprised like by the other three teams a lot, especially Zeta, because I didn't think they will even like get out of groups. They did, and like they're doing a really good job right now, and watching them is also like really nice. Even I still a lot of things right now from Lacy and Dep, and like using it even right now in practice and things like.
Is their style unusual, do you think?
Have
they got an unusual style?
I mean, yeah, I think especially Lacy is doing something like what most of the players, especially in the EU, like don't do or don't have balls to do. So right now I'm just like testing it out, and it actually just works because usually no one expects it, but he does it in like really good timings.
Okay. I could be off on this one. Which team was it, Gio? Was it Zeta or Paper X was the one that we were talking about where it's like they attack like early in the round or whatever and they can upset some of the tactical teams? Do you remember who we were referring to last episode when we talked about that?
Yeah, I think
I'm sure it was like an Asian team, right?
We were talking about who...
You pick the one you want to start with, but obviously we've got all these great underdog teams we can talk about. So pick one that you've been interested in that's made it thus far. Let's get into it.
Me?
Yeah, like maybe do you want to keep going on Zeta? What do you want to do?
I mean, Zeta is really interesting because, again, yeah, like I agree with you. I mean, Laz has obviously kind of been the big player that everybody's talking about with them as just having been phenomenally impressive. Zeta beating DRX, I think, was like a huge surprise that at least I didn't foresee. I mean, obviously in the last episode that we did, we were kind of talking about our expectations for the playoff bracket. And, we got it got to the game where Loud beat Team Liquid. And I was like, well, fuck, all of our like predictions that we made are already gone to shit.
Sure.
So, but Zeta beating DRX that was a game that I really didn't foresee because, I thought the DRX were going to be like structured and stable enough to make it further in the bracket. And that for me is probably the game that has really piqued my interest about Zeta, even though they've beaten, they beat Team Liquid just prior to that. And they obviously had a really good run in the group stage or whatever. But like, that was the game that for me, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And now Zeta and Paper X are going to be playing against each other in their next game. And that is a game where I really struggle to think about who I think is going to win. And I think part of the reason I struggle with that is because Paper X had the buy-in to the playoff bracket, and therefore we've seen more from Zeta than we have from Paper X. Yes. So like part of me is like, all right, Zeta, they've like got their hands dirty, like they're a known quantity now, and they've been consistent in this, and Paper X have only played a couple of games. But Paper X have also 2-0'd both of those games, and they were both like major region teams. So
for sure, yeah. Potential favorites, right?
Yeah. And The fact that they beat G2, like G2 barely got to look at the competition. Like, they barely got to experience this bracket. So I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent because I've sort of spoken about both of the teams because they're going to be playing against each other in this next game. But I really, really, genuinely don't know who to expect to win that. If I really had to pick, I'd probably say Zeta, probably because we've seen more of them, which isn't necessarily a super fundamentally robust reason, but I haven't got anything better than that.
Fair enough. Okay. So when in need, you have to do what you have to do. Exactly. Right, here's the question, Derke. When you were actually briefly at the tournament, were you actually also playing some of the scrims with your team, or were you just practicing solo, or what? Did you ever play any scrims?
I played 2 scrims, and it was when Boster had to do press conference. So I was playing breach support agents or whatever.
Okay.
And we didn't play any of the teams in the tournament, I think.
Right, okay.
And then I was just playing solo, ranked, whatever, and just watching team. Sometimes I watch them prac, watching mini screen or whatever.
Ah, right, I see.
Yeah. And didn't see much. There wasn't any team in the event that they practiced.
Ah, okay, fair enough. Right, in that case then, obviously you're just going like an observer like the rest of us. What do you think of this matchup? Who wins out of Zeta and Paper X for you? Who's the better team?
I think Zeta, they're kind of momentum team. And I think everyone steps up individually. And I think just based off the momentum, and also I'm just biased because fanboying them a lot.
Okay.
And we lost to them too.
That's a good reason.
Yeah. I'm just I think they can just take it and win it. And I just somehow feel it's going to be Loud against Zeta grand finals. So I'm just rooting for them both.
Okay, there's an interesting angle. So, okay, give me your thoughts on that. Why you saw you implied earlier it was sort of you knew before even the tournament began Loud is going to be good, right? So you were like you said you obviously didn't expect them to be the upper bracket foul, for example, but do you have them as the best team now in the bracket?
Loud, yeah.
Okay, what reasons? Why did they impress there?
I mean, just their players are insane. They're I don't know, their team play is good. Their players mechanically are good, and then it's everyone steps up in the right moments. And I just don't see that in Optic that very much, as I see it in Loud. And I just think if Loud has a good start, they're just gonna take it with momentum. And I just don't know. I didn't prac against Loud. I pracked against Optic lately, and just even based on that, I'm just gonna go with Loud.
Optic wasn't that impressive?
No.
In prac, that is? Oh, okay, fair enough.
No.
Were they perchance shit-talking you during the... Because apparently that's everyone comes on the show European and just says they're all trash-talking everyone in scrims, apparently.
Nah, I think they weren't because we were winning at one point.
Oh, right, I see. They were too bad, right?
I think it was close prac or even 12-12. So no, it was trash talking.
Fair enough. Right, what do you think?
Every NA team is somehow friendly to us, but then I hear stories with some other teams, for EU players are yeah, these guys just trash talk us or tell us to qualify or shit. Every other team is just friendly to us.
Sure. Come on, Gio, what do you think of Loud? Because obviously, again, with our natural bias that we totally disclose on this show, we're low-key rooting for Optic. But just because they're playing them doesn't mean they can't win. Can they beat Optic, do you think?
Yeah, I do. So here's the thing with Loud is I didn't know anything about the Brazilian region. Well, I didn't know anything about the Brazilian region outside of teams that I'd seen in international competition before. Okay. And obviously they went in the group stage, so I didn't see any of them there. And then, there was the Loud versus Team Liquid game where Loud beat them, and it was okay, holy shit. I think that Loud can beat Optic because my concern with Optic is while they have... they've really developed this way of playing and these compositions they like to use and stuff, and it's got them this far. It hasn't been really decisive. Their first game in this tournament was a 2-0 loss. They managed to turn that around into a 2-0 win in their decider match. But then it's like every game that they've played in the bracket so far has been a 2-1. And it's just like, I don't necessarily have a ton of faith that Optic are giving decisive enough victories for me to believe that they can't be upset. Which is a shame for me to say, because I thought that if they beat the Guard, that was going to be a really solid showing, and then actually Optic would have an easier time going through the rest of the bracket after that. And it's by no means me saying that I think Optic are bad, but I think that Optic are kind of their own enemies, because you can tell when Optic have been mentally boomed as well. Anytime you see Optic start to rely too much on Ye and not enough on the rest of the team, you can tell they're mentally boomed. And I feel like Optic are at a point where they may start to get stressed, especially if they are going to continue bringing out these like what have become the characteristic Optic strats and stuff, which at this point in the competition, everyone has seen a lot of. Now, it could be that they have something brand new to bring out, but still they're going against a team that has had to show a lot less in the competition so far, because they've only played 2 games so far. A team that has massively upset 2 of these massive European teams. And yeah, just like Derke says, like Loud look very cohesive. They are incredibly mechanically skilled. You know, they kind of have that flair that you see with Brazilian teams in basically any esport, right? Where you just sort of look at them and you're like, how the fuck are you doing that? And I just worry that that kind of like known quantity, only just good enough sometimes thing with Optic is not actually going to be enough to hold up against a real powerhouse that Loud are showing themselves to be so far.
Derke, what would your explanation be if someone said, so I'm like a total layman, I barely know Valorant at all, right? So when I was looking into the stories before this tournament of all the teams, like everyone, I just assumed like, right, these big names are all going to get out, or these teams from small regions, they can't be any good, like in most games. It'll be like CS, it'll be like NA and EU, and then maybe like DRX could be good or something, you know, because Koreans practice a million hours. Like, so I'm amazed by all these results, because as I say, like, if you look, there's no logic almost just like A beats B beats C beats D beats C. So what is your thoughts? Like, what is it about the meta or the game at the moment? Why is there so much parity between the teams, do you think?
It's just like regions again. And in CSGO, it's like, I can say that every region, every team has like kind of same game. Whereas in this game, like some Asian teams can play different comps against different comps, come to like EU event and just bash everyone, because EU is not like ready for that, and people are not testing that much in EU or NA.
Can you give a good example? Is there like a team you're thinking of when you say that?
Paper X, like they play Euro on bind. Yeah. Then just coming here, like beating G2 instantly, and like I'm like 99% sure G2 didn't crack any Euro for like probably a month or 2.
Right.
Like they probably don't know what that agent can do, and then it's like hard to play against an agent who got like buffed. Abilities change. He can throw a fake who flashes you if you shoot him, which is like just insane to think about. That you cannot crack against that much in EU, because no one plays that. Everyone thinks, oh, you need to have these agents, and then I'm of course going to say like EU. We didn't have FPX come out who were like strong and came out top 1 in EU challengers. I got COVID, so we played with 2 stand-ins. Then Liquid comes in, who like didn't even qualify here, but like got the spot because of FPX. And yeah, I think like G2 got upset for some reasons, and I think like the bind they lost just because like they know how they play comp, and it's kind of like same reason Optic lost when Chad, their coach, was like in some interview, this team has cringe comps.
Yes.
Like, you know, yeah, that might be the reason, but like, if you lose an event like that, that's your own fault. And I feel like other teams underestimate other regions because of that, because they test a lot, they prac a lot, and then they come out and do like new stuff, because first international event last year, Iceland, it's like, of course, EU and A going to be on top when everybody looks at them, and we never saw the clash. So it was like the first time ever we see teams from other regions play each other, and it was the same thing. NA played different comps than EU, and like I know Brazil tried to like copy more EU than NA, and there was just a clash, and we've never seen that before.
That's a very fair point. Obviously, his point is like in CSGO, the meta is like somewhat set. It's only really if you like never interact with Europe, for example, that you'd have like a weird different meta. But like based on what he's saying, like it does seem like essentially Chet wasn't totally wrong. They were doing something unusual, but that's been like the fucking theme of the tournament, right, Gio? People just come with their own style, and if their style works, it works.
Yeah, I mean, like with this Yoru thing with Paper Rex, right? It's like if you look at that composition on paper and you don't see the game, you could be like, that's so cheesy. And it's like, all right, cool, but they brought it anyway. So either you play well against it or you don't. Like, do you know what I mean? I think that's kind of like, you know, sort of what Derke was saying, where it's like, yeah, it's, you know, people from different regions are going to be bringing different ideas of the right way to play the game, and it might not have been something that you've come across before, and you could be phenomenal in your own region at dealing with your region's meta, but when it comes to international competition, you need to be a lot more versatile. And the interesting thing as well, actually, I just wanted to add about the Yoru thing is, so it might not have been a thing that really came up in EMEA VCT, but actually we saw it come up in the regional leagues when we were doing the regional league, the Northern Europe one. Tundra actually used Yoru on bind a couple times. It was Bonka who was playing it, and it was awful. It was really bad. And I remember walking away from the first game where we saw that happen, and I was like, oh my god, I really hope no one ever does this again. And I guess, you know, Paper Rex are proving it wrong, because the issue that I found is like with that game that we were watching in the regional leagues is it became so telegraphed. It was like, oh my god, they're gonna send the fake flash up B long. You know, and it was like, just became so obvious what was going to happen every single time. So, you know, even though maybe it hasn't been seen as much like at the tier 1 level in Europe, there have been some teams that have played about with that, but it just hasn't, people haven't like found the right way of doing that in Europe. And yet, you know, over in SEA, they have found that. Paper Rex have proven that they can do that. And it's like, cool, it could be that teams from other regions now go away to their own domestic leagues and they start to adopt those kinds of ideas. But either way, they're going to walk away and be like, all right, well, we've learned a bit about how to deal with this situation. I think that as the international events go on, people are going to be building their sort of repertoire of ideas of how to deal with different styles and different approaches to the game a lot more. You know, the actual events have only been happening for a year now. And this is the 4th one. So there's still plenty of time for teams to start to really learn a lot more about the way that the other regions want to play, and be able to deal with different metas. Definitely better, I think. But yeah, you do have that kind of rock, paper, scissors effect right now, I think, which helps with the parity. I think that the other thing with the parity as well is like, there is very little in the actual domestic leagues themselves to give these big regions, quote unquote, a massive advantage. So for example, like, in a lot of esports, you might have like a LAN league or something like that.
Perfect example. Yeah.
Right, which gives certain regions like really huge advantages.
Yes.
Because naturally you're getting LAN experience and you're playing under a, you know, no ping and stuff like that, which is probably going to elevate your skill level and the level to which you're playing much better than some of these smaller regions. But as it stands in Valorant, because Valorant's only really existed in the COVID era, that isn't really a thing, and it's still very young. The only thing you could really argue is like investment from organizations still puts more money into the big regions. So like the resources directly available to some of these teams will still be more. But the actual difference, I think, like the range in what you see between like EUNA and then like the smaller regions like LATAM, Brazil, SEA is a lot smaller than you see in other major esports.
Yeah, that's a good point, because obviously if it was like CSGO, for example, all the lands are in Europe and North America. So basically you probably play 10 times more lands if you're a top team from that region. And if you're the smaller team, you might not even have qualifiers for some of those. So it's true.
Yeah.
If you come to this, like every X months, there's just one tournament. There was no extra tournament to play in to get extra reps. You just play in your own region. So makes sense. What about this then, Derke? Right? If you're talking about like all the variety and the different picks and different comps that are coming out, that must surprise you because you've already played 2 agents this year. Well, you played 2 agents. Where are all the rest? Where's the chamber? What the fuck? What's going on? There's just 2. You're just that good on those 2. You don't need any others.
I think
Might now after the jet changes.
I was supposed to play other agents too.
Were you going to bring some out of this tournament? Obviously, you won't be playing it now. Did you have something prepared you were going to show us?
Yeah, there was. I mean, like...
You can't reveal it? It's too top secret?
Probably not. Probably because...
Fair enough, okay. I don't want to get in trouble.
It's Phoenix!
I don't care. Probably, yeah. Most are playing Phoenix now in the...
Right.
I mean, I like the variety and like different regions playing different agents and like trying stuff out, bringing new meta, because I feel like game was a bit boring and turning into like boring thing where one team sets how you're supposed to play, and then everybody else in that region who's lower than you follows it.
Yes.
And now I feel like when it happens now for the second time where some like minor region comes in and upsets the like big regions, I think it should set into people's mind that you don't have to play certain comps or certain agents to do well. It's like you kind of need to find something for your own team, your own style, your own comps, and see how it works. Same as like as other teams cannot rely on their like players and they want to be more tactical or like more like robots. And some teams want to be more like, I don't know, defaults, individuals and do something. Yes. And that's what I noticed a lot in EMEA. I felt like only team who was more like real individuals was FPX, because I didn't feel like they have like too much set things like, oh, if they do like thing number 1, you do this, and strat B, whatever. They're like,
I think Ardis, we had Ardis on our episode. He basically said like they just let him do whatever he wants.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, and that's a cool thing. And I also felt like playing against them, I felt like their comms is like, yo, dude, come with me, let's push this together. Whereas other teams are like, okay, we are not doing this until this guy calls it, you know?
Right.
And it's like, you sit like a robot then. And I can say our team does that too. And I kind of want to get away from it. I want to be like more, you know, like an individual, tell my team, oh, let's go do this. Right. Let's like give a couple of headshots there.
Yes.
And, like do things, because then
more fluid.
People cannot like read you that much.
Yes.
When you're a robot, and I feel like that's what happened also to DRX against Zeta. It's like they're just robots. Yeah, they're high individuals, but I felt like every time same and same. Then Zeta comes in, and I said, Last does something like unusual, an unusual timing, gets 1 or 2, and then gets off because he plays a like dump agent, which I call like when you have an agent which has a get out of jail free card like Jet, Reyna, or Chamber, which like I don't think that should be in game, even though I abuse it. But like, I mean, those robot players, just like or teams, they just like step down in those international events because one team is gonna like just be their own individual, do something unusual, and that's it.
Right, what about this then? You said you thought Optic was overrated, but obviously they're in the last 4 now. How do you actually think they will do in this tournament?
I think whoever wins this semi-final between Loud and Optic might win the event. Like, I hardly think so, but like, I'm still rooting for Zeta and also Paper Rex. Like, who comes up from that, I'm going to root for them. But I just feel like the 2 teams on the upper bracket right now are like too strong for them. Even if Optic has a bad day, it still will be like a hard game for Paper Rex or Zeta. But like, I feel like if Loud wins Optic now, they will just win the whole event.
One point you made, which is a very fair point, is like if you actually look realistically, Europe sent one proper team. They just sent G2. That's a team that qualified and had the real lineup. Your team had the stand-ins. Team Liquid wasn't supposed to be there, and like just look at the situation. It's not the end. It's not that shocking that they would do it badly. I'll ask the obvious bias question: if Europe could have actually sent the 3 best teams, so FPX scores, your team goes with you. Obviously G2 would it have been much different? Like, how do you think the other 2 teams would have done? Yours and FPX if they'd been there, just hypothetically.
I think FPX could get top 4 easily. I think even though I will come in, I don't think we will probably have super good results because we had problems with me and Brave, and we saw those problems against other teams without us too.
Right. Okay.
And I just feel like even with me coming and us having only one stand-in, we will still have the same problems and crumble on them.
Fair enough.
Because they were when we noticed them for the first time, they were small, but then they increased to huge size, which destroyed us against the G2 and the FPX. And I just feel like if we didn't fix that at that time, we will still crumble. But I think we will be in playoffs too. G2, I don't know really. I think same result, but I think FPX will do good.
Bearing as Geo, obviously NA somewhat shit the bed aside from Optic. It's not like I can big that region up, but I wanted to actually ask that question, right? Would it have made that much of a difference if EU had sent all the best teams? Because I have to say, one of the reasons I asked him about it, why he only plays 2 agents, is because when I looked, it looks like the Europeans, aside from Team Liquid bizarrely, have a bit more of a set idea of how the game's played, and they were a little bit more
Team Liquid
limited.
Is definitely the anomaly, I think.
Yeah, they're the weird ones. So would it have mattered much if Europe sent the best, do you think?
So I think, the interesting one to look at in that hypothesis for me would be the FPX going instead of Team Liquid, because Team Liquid came top of their group. I think that FPX would have been able to do that as well. And then in terms of the bracket, FPX probably would have had a much better time in the bracket than Team Liquid have. So I think from that perspective, yes, Team Liquid would have FPX would have done better, and therefore Europe would have done better. G2 are G2. They've already shown us what they can do, which in this case was not very much. As for FNATIC, the big question for me about whether FNATIC would have had a better time is, Derke, you were just saying how you feel like one of the flaws that you guys have as a team is that you can still be a little bit too robotic and not really free-flowing, in which case, would you have been able to beat Zeta Division in the groups? Because that's the big question I would have is if Zeta Division being very intuitive players in the way that you described and what you think is a huge benefit in international competition, if that has been such a major part of why they've done well, would actual FNATIC have been able to stop them in the group stage? Because I don't know about DRX did very well in the group stage. Zeta really would have been the team to beat, and that's where I wonder would that have actually made much of a difference if you feel like the fundamental playstyle of structure versus looseness still would have been a problem?
I think we will beat them. Even with me, even if we play same robotic way, with me it's just it's robotic, but things work out way much better. And also I could pull off some stuff, and I'm the how you say it, I find the gaps very easily, and also I like to break the defaults of other teams, and I think I will clash with Zeta pretty well. But the rest of the team is what I meant. It's robotic, and it was only me who had the freedom to do something, which I'm kind of glad that my team gives me freedom. But I also would everyone else the freedom too at some points.
By the way, let's talk about some of the teams that aren't in the tournament, because obviously there was some very big names that had different stories. Like Geo, when we had the episode where we had Barbar on, it sounded to me like he was realistically just bigging up the idea of versatility and all the possible. Look, if you're a coach, I get why that'd be a brilliant concept. The problem I have is I don't know if he's just biased to EU teams, but it did actually feel like he overrated Team Liquid a bit. He was making them sound really fucking strong. Were they underwhelming to you in the playoffs? Obviously, they were supposed to go further than they did, sure.
the big thing that we were talking about with Team Liquid, and this point is why I was the most surprised that Team Liquid seemed to have kind of flopped in the playoffs, and that is that we were really hyping up their LAN experience. And
True,
we were like,
yes.
oh, like when you're going into a competition against a bunch of teams that don't necessarily have tons of LAN experience, and you need to have that kind of veteranship, whatever, like that is what I thought would drive Team Liquid, because I am not a huge fan of the way that Team Liquid like play, just in terms of, the fact that they like switch roles out a bunch. And I know some people are like, well, for the different maps, like the different role, blah, blah, blah. For me personally, it's just not my favorite way of seeing a team play. Team Liquid didn't qualify for this event. Like at the end of the day, they didn't. So in terms of like the actual level of play, I suppose it's understandable that Team Liquid would have gone out kind of early. I think that they did. I was going to say they did such a good job in the group stage that maybe I would have expected more. But actually thinking about it, they beat Crew and they beat Xerxia. They didn't actually have to play Optic in the group stage.
Yes.
That really would have probably been the measuring stick as to what to expect from them in the playoffs, because obviously Crew and Xerxia didn't make it into the bracket. But yeah, I think given I thought that maybe their LAN experience would give them a bit more of an edge than we did see from them. But in terms of like how I have preference for different playstyles and whatnot, I personally... I'm not super surprised that the Team Liquid style of doing things did not get them very far compared to other teams.
What do you think of Team Liquid, Derke? Because obviously they've got huge names. Like, it sounds cool if you can play all these agents, but in my opinion, here's the problem. If you do something wacky, right, it has to work before it's cool. It's not just cool that's like a great idea. So, like, obviously everyone would love to say, we all play 4 different agents and duelists, but you have to make it work. So what do you think thoughts on Team Liquid?
I don't like their structure just by looking at the agents too. It's like their roles just clash. Everyone can play like same agents mostly. It's like it sometimes feels like they have 3 or 4 duelists in the team, which is like a bad thing. And we had a problem last Iceland with that too, where I played like Jet, Sova, and Sage sometimes, which is like almost 3 different roles. And Doma played like Sky on some maps, Sage I think, then Raze, which is like already a clash between 2 players, instead of putting like me on Jet and Raze and Dom on Flashes, which we did later on, and I think it worked better for us. I think they need to figure out roles for their players, change like I don't know, maybe even do changes on that, like based on the team. If they cannot like get someone to play those agents, then like I think it's a moment where you say like, why are you in this team then? Like,
let me ask you a tough question, right? Yeah. Just hypothetically, imagine you were the general manager of Team Liquid and you can choose what direction to take the team in, right? We won't necessarily say who you can't or who you've recruited. All I would ask is this: which players would you focus on in this lineup? Like, who would you want to be on the duelist, and who would you want to be the focal point? Because I notice all the discussion is always like, we might put Scream on a duelist. Like, isn't that why you had him in the team? Like, what the fuck were you doing before? Like, they always do that thing in interviews where they themselves keep saying, we're going to change things up. It's like, you're the ones who picked it. Like, what? So who would you focus on? Who are the players that you want the team to be based around to be good?
Scream duelist, of course. I think Yampi performed good on Sova/Sentinels, but it's like, if I will have to pick one, I think I'll still go with Sova.
Okay.
Or like Initiators, probably. Then it's like, Naivira, I think they took him as a Sentinel. But then there's the thing, Link plays Sentinel too. So it's like...
Right.
Like, for me, it's like, one of them has to adapt to other role, or there's no point of them two being in a team. Maybe I don't see something, but it's like, if you want a team, you need 5 good players on their roles. And right now there is like players that conflict roles between each other. And it's like, I don't even know who's their IGL. I don't know who could be IGL, because
I believe they said it's Yampy, but who knows if that's true.
Yeah, but then
feels weird.
But then I read somewhere that they're trying to put it on Link now, when it was like before it was Scream and partly Soulcast, and I'm like, like for me, if I'm even like some VLR.gg user, I'm like, why don't you just get a leader like IGL, like
true,
and then build of that? It's just like a clash. They try to change each other. It's like different event, different role for the player, and like I don't know what they're going for with that. My
biggest controversial Valorant esports opinion has always been that I am not a fan of Yampy. It's not that I think he's a bad player. It's that for me on Team Liquid, it has always felt like they have taken this mechanically great player and tried to put him in this roster, and there is not really a place for him on this roster. Like, for me, it's always felt like they've tried him on these different roles and nothing has ever quite worked for him, and they know he's really good individually, so they want to keep him there. But like, I never really liked Yampy on Jet, and I know there are people who sing the praises of Yampy on Jet, but I always felt like having Yampy on the duelist, especially while he was IGLing, just felt kind of uncomfortable. It didn't feel like he was getting as much out of the role as other duelists at the same time were doing in Europe. And I always felt like Scream should have been the guy that they were basing everything around, and instead sometimes it felt like they were making compromises with Scream because they felt like they could put him onto different roles to make up for the fact that they wanted Yampy to be like this center guy. And for me personally, it's like, I think Yampy's a great player. It has always very slightly felt like they've managed to take 5 pieces that will all fit in the jar, but like don't fit in the jar in like a tessellating kind of way that you really want from a team. And that's always just felt very slightly uncomfortable about Team Liquid for me.
Okay. I can see what you mean by that, because I have to say, when I look at this team and I've read all these interviews about them where they're all giving all these conflicting opinions, it does sound like what they've done is, because if people don't know, most of their players, almost all of them, including the coach, come from CSGO. It looks like their logic is, look, we're all really good at CSGO, so like, surely we can figure this out. And it's like, in this scenario, I'm like you, Derke. I would just say, why not just get someone who plays that fucking role? Just get the best guy who plays that role in Valorant, don't just go, but yeah, Nivera's AWP in CS. It doesn't matter, it's not CSGO, is it? Because if people don't know, the weirdest thing is, those 3 players are like hard mechanical players in CSGO. Nivera was like a pure AWPer who was barely experienced, and all he did was AWP. That's all. He was the 6th man in Vitality. They just brought him into AWP on maps. Scream is just famous for just like only being the fucking guy with the crosshair headshot everyone. And then Yampy was just very inexperienced, but he was also just like a mechanics monster with the AWP. So that's why I find it so weird that when I look into the roles they play in the game, I'm like, what the fuck? There's only like one guy who's on the role that makes sense for him. What the fuck? What do you think, Derke?
Yeah, I'm on the same opinion. It just like feels uncomfortable having that many players that I think are only for one role. And it's like, I think each one of them will shine on that role the best, but they cannot play 3 players in the same role. So it's sometimes like you will have to like let someone play some dog role, and he might have dog performance.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And like, do you really need a team where like 2 or 3 players have to make sacrifices like that all the time? Where you can just get someone like on those roles if they cannot perform. And like, yeah, there's a bunch of CS players, and I see like, even I think I discussed that on stream with viewers or something. It's like they have 5 CS players, and like it feels like they don't know what roles to pick. But I don't want to like complain about it or like
you don't want to get too good. Just stay as you are.
Too. And it's like I'm friends with some of them.
Of course.
I'm also like sometimes thinking like, what's the point if they can just like make something like work? And even in our team, like last year at Champs, we only had 2 CS players, which is like me and Booster, and we weren't known for like
no,
top frag.
Yeah, exactly.
Or doing such. I was offered for some like tier 2000 Finnish team.
Sure.
But like here, I'm just entering. Booster didn't IGL back then either, and we are now doing our jobs where we think we are the best. And also we took like one player from Rust, which is like just a building game, farming game.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
And
it's a bit of a weird angle, but okay.
And he did a good job on like Sentinel. Then we had like 2 Battle Royals players, one like Doma on Ray / Flashers and Mist.
I'm sure that brings something, all right, having all these different games coming in together, right?
And it's like, I don't feel like you need that much of CS experience. I think you might only need one guy with basics who can just like teach that to everyone else. It's not like you need 5 players from CSGO that know the basics. Like, it's different game after all, and there's going to be different issues.
Yeah, very fair point. I even think that's an area where, like, that's an angle maybe some GMs have been a bit naive in. Like, if you actually had someone, like it was in bloody Overwatch League, and then you had a guy who was in fucking CSGO as a top player, and then you have someone from another game, you could have a totally different vision on the game. You could see different areas, whereas I'm sure one of the problems, I mean, I know some of my friends who were CSGO pros who changed to Valorant. Some of them did say, I did just play for the first 6 months like it was a different version of CSGO, and like I had to eventually learn, like, there's totally different concepts to this game, and like, I actually just don't know things exist, because I'm just trying to do my thing and sort of fit a square peg through a round hole, as the analogy goes. You know, they said, a lot of them said they were doing that. Whereas if people don't know, this is even something famous. It happened in CSGO. The first great CSGO team, NIP, the real secret of how they did it is, yes, they had some amazing 1.6 players, but they had half Source players and half 1.6. And the point is, CSGO initially was more like CS Source. So what happened is, even though the 1.6 players were considered better and more mechanically skilled, they didn't know the game played or any of like the dynamics. So what happened is, the really good 1.6 players on NIP just got up to speed really quick from the Source players, and they would just roll in immediately. Whereas what happened is, other CS 1.6 teams just brought the whole lineup over, like some legendary lineup. But then, you know, those players didn't know the game, and they were all learning at the same time. They all had different conceptions. And spoiler, some people who were good in the old game start good in this game. You have to bite the bullet eventually on that one. Some people won't be as good. Right, as a last topic, what about this then? I wanted to ask this, Gio. So obviously on this show, there's no Cloud9. So there is Optic. We've already talked about them. So the other team that we fanboy, without any apology, is obviously the Guard. What happened to the Guard? Give me your thoughts.
I think it is kind of the what we were all somewhat expecting, and that is that the Guard just are rookies for the most part, you know? And I felt it was so like difficult to read like Net's tweets about it, and you could see how heartbroken they were and just super crushed. And there is a part of me that is like, you know, it's like it's like how I imagine a parent feels when they watch their teenager go through their first heartbreak, you know, and it's like, you've just got to tell them, like, yeah, like, you were always going to go through this, like, and it was going to be shit, but like, you learn and grow from it.
There'll be other ones. It's like, exactly.
Yeah, it's sort of
play
like,
more VCT in the sea.
I think that we all had this sort of like hope that the Guard would just be able to be incredible and blitz through the playoffs, and it was going to be this miracle run and this incredible story. But realistically, as fundamentally insane a team as they are, there are a lot of like young people on this team who have never been in an environment like this before, and that can't be underestimated. As much as like we would love to believe that it can be, and that they can just come in and just blow the whole world away like a second time after an AVCT, that just I don't think was going to happen realistically. And you know, they put up a fight against Optic. It was a 2-1, and then obviously Paper Rex, they are just nothing like anything that the Guard will have faced. And Paper Rex hadn't been in the group stage, so it's not like they had anything super recent to go off in terms of prepping for that game. And that it's just very alien environment. to this team. And I'm just sort of like, they're an amazing team, but I'm kind of not surprised. But what I do think is that it was a necessary experience for them. So the next time, because I do not think this is the last LAN that they will qualify for, next time they will be able to learn from this experience and actually get further as a result. And this is the beginning of that growth period of their potential success on an international stage.
Well, do you have any thoughts on Derke? Obviously, this is a team that surprised many people by making it out of the NA qualifier, but looked very good in doing so.
No, I don't have many thoughts. I feel like I didn't know the event would be like that. Half of the teams are in playoffs already, and half.
Oh yes, no one knew the format. Yes, true.
Because I feel like if it will be like everyone has to go through groups, I feel like Guard will have to will make it out of the groups, but I don't think they will like go far in the playoffs.
Right.
But like they made playoffs, so yeah.
I'll just say, like, absolutely, in every game I've followed, the difference between having LAN experience and none can be enormous. Obviously, the real problem as well is this. If it's one player, sometimes you get lucky. Like in CSGO, we just had a player who was a 16-year-old Russian player, Monacy, who was amazing his first big LAN. It didn't matter, actually. There wasn't a problem. But that's very rare. And as I always say, if you're rolling the die on one player, imagine having a team of 2 or 3 players that haven't had the experience. Like, it's very easy. You could end up with a scenario. All you need is one player to play bad and you can lose the game. 2 or 3 people are off the game, you can just look half as good, can't you? You're just not as good a team. And I'm sure, by the way, in this scenario, as you say, they were on paper, Gio, they weren't supposed to get out of the NA qualifier, so they already made it further than they should have to some degree. So this is actually good reps for the next one. Maybe in the next one they're legit and they actually make it this far.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely, I don't know if I'd say like, the next Masters, they're going to win. That I don't even fucking know who's going to win this one.
No one can really know that, sure.
But obviously,
the potential's there, though.
I wouldn't be surprised to see them get to the next Masters, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them do better than they have in this one. It would be interesting if, let's say they don't win the next NA finals like they did this time, and therefore they don't get a bye into the playoffs, how a group stage would affect them, like whether they A, get out of a group stage, B, having that time to like warm up within a group stage gives them time to get more used to the LAN environment, have more experience with it and more games under their belt during the course of the event. All of these sorts of different aspects that can come into it. But yeah, I this isn't a team that I look at and I'm like, yeah, they didn't make it. Okay, yeah, they weren't that good. No way. This is the beginning of their journey.
Okay. Right, one last question would be this, Derke. Are you, like a lot of other people, I want to see where your sense is on this. People basically think, even though the ex-Gambit team didn't even qualify, a lot of people think secretly they are still really good. Like, if they were there, they'd be super good. Like, they could maybe still be one of the best teams in the world. Do you have that sense about the ex-Gambit players?
The mech, yeah?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just saying ex-Gambit because I can't use the name Gambit at the moment. I didn't want to make it too complicated on that one. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not used to it. I think they're always going to be a great team, but I feel like if you don't make it to the event, you cannot like make excuse. If we will have been there, or shit. That's why I don't like some EU players that were tweeting about us when we lost to like Zeta and like bumped out of the tournament, like FNATIC 2 subs copium or whatever. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, but why the fuck are you not there then? And I feel like same with Gambit, you cannot call them best or maybe one of the best if they didn't make it to the event, even though they had like 2 millisecond like diffuse why they lost and didn't make it. It's like I just don't like those excuses.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, William Peyton Lacy, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks always goes up to Jerky's Minion. Want to suggest a topic or a guest? Want to ask a question in my monthly AMA? I promise they're coming. Want teasers for my upcoming content? Would you like to be in one of those lengthy donated discussions with me? Well, if any of the above tickles your fancy or the other perks available, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today, where? In the description box below.